Hello and welcome to Theme Park History, the channel for everything to do with theme parks, big and small, old and new. In today's episode, we will be taking a look at the history of Six Flags Great Adventure's Haunted Castle, a haunted house attraction that opened in 1978 and closed on May 11th, 1984. When a guest steps through the entrance of a theme park, they may have a few goals in mind. Thrills, laughs, screams, and sometimes even scares. Six Flags Great Adventure, located only an hour away from New York City in Jackson, New Jersey, opened in 1974 with the intention to give guests just that. After 4 years of successful operation with a mix of traditional rides such as a log flume and a carousel, and more thrilling experiences such as Big Fury Steel Coaster, the park decided to add something new. In October of 1978, Haunted Castle, a walk-through haunted attraction, was leased as a temporary attraction for the Halloween season. The Haunted Castle was meant to spook and scare the guests of Six Flags Great Adventure, but in May of 1984, the screams coming for the attraction ended up being more than just fun and games. Originally created by George Mahana, owner of the now-defunct Toms River Haunted House Company in 1978, Six Flags Great Adventure leased the haunt as a temporary October attraction, not unlike the park's annual Fright Fest attraction still held to this day. Originally known as the Haunted House, the attraction was constructed of 4 aluminum semi-trailers with scenes pre-installed by the company. Great Adventure was responsible for building a facade that would create the illusion of a haunted house. The park built a wooden front that resembled a white 2-story house with green shingles and shutters contained by an iron fence and gates. The attraction had a gatekeeper stationed outside with a doorkeeper admitting visitors, while 3 or 4 monsters inside occupied various scenes or wandered around surprising and frightening groups of visitors. The staffing requirements for the haunted house were drawn from other areas of the park. They were clowns and street performers when they weren't acting as vampires or serial killers. The haunted house, not originally designed to be a permanent attraction, was to be returned to Mahana when the park closed for that season. However, due to the attraction's instant popularity and positive guest reaction, Great Adventure signed a longer lease with renovations to make the haunted house a permanent attraction at the park. Increasing in size from 4 to 17 trailers, 8 to a side mirroring each other with separate corridors with a common control room in the center, and built on a new site in the park, the Haunted Castle attraction officially opened in 1979. The castle's trailers were linked by plywood partitions to create a complex maze. The interiors were built of plywood walls and ceilings with wooden studs for support. The materials used on the walls included foam rubber, various fabrics and plastics, plywood, and tar paper. Wax mannequins were used as props. A facade of false turrets and towers lent the illusion of height to the 1-story structure, completing the look of a forbidding medieval castle. After crossing a drawbridge over the surrounding moat, visitors entered the castle and felt their way along a 450-foot-long convoluted path of dim corridors, occasionally being startled by employees dressed as Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and other creatures hiding throughout the attraction. Various theatrical props and exhibits were in view, including coffins, ghoulish mannequins, hanging spiderwebs, and skeletons. Strobe lights and eerie sounds completed the scenes. The Haunted Castle quickly became the park's largest single-show attraction, as during peak attendance times both sides of the attraction would be in use, and thousands of visitors would come throughout the normal hours of operation. Despite its success, the management of Great Adventure considered the Haunted Castle to be a back-burner attraction, as it was buried in the back of the park and didn't have a roller coaster attached to it or one nearby. Throughout its lifespan, the attraction wasn't paid much attention to, as management decided to focus instead on promoting the premier roller coasters the park was known for and building newer and more exciting roller coasters with newer cutting-edge technology at the time. Years of not giving the attraction much thought would come back to haunt Great Adventure, however, as on May 11, 1984, the Haunted Castle quickly and permanently became one of the park's most infamous attractions. On Friday, May 11, 1984 at 6:45 p.m., a fire started inside the Haunted Castle. Fanned by outside air conditioners that continued to push air up through the floor vents, the fire spread rapidly due to the flammable materials used in the construction of the attraction. Only one side of the attraction was open at the time, with 29 people inside when the fire started. One witness, whose group entered the attraction 3 to 5 minutes after the fire had started, stated when she reached the display called the Hunchback, she saw flames coming from around the bend beyond the display. She thought it was part of the show, but then smelled smoke and realized that the flames were real. Her group started shouting fire and ran back to the entrance for safety. Firefighters from 11 surrounding communities responded, and the fire was declared under control at 7:45 p.m. The park remained open during the fire, but closed 2 hours early at 8 p.m. Of the 29 people inside the attraction, 14, including 4 employees, were able to escape. 7 were treated for smoke inhalation at a local area hospital. Unfortunately, 8 teenagers from a group of 9 that entered together were trapped inside and killed by asphyxiation. The only survivor of the group, 15-year-old Suzette Elliott, was carried to safety by a park employee. No one realized that lives were lost until later that night when firefighters searching in one of the burnt-out trailers discovered the 8 deceased teenagers who were burnt beyond recognition and at first thought to be mannequins. Their causes of death were smoke inhalation and carbon monoxide poisoning. These 8 teenage corpses were placed in white body bags to let emergency personnel differentiate real corpses and charred mannequins in the dark. The fire spotlighted a complex collection of local, state, and federal laws. New Jersey's Department of Labor and Industries inspects the safety of rides, such as roller coasters and Ferris wheels. Locally, municipalities enforce state and local building codes governing fire safety and electrical wiring. In turn, the state's Department of Community Affairs is responsible for ensuring that these municipalities enforce the codes. Finally, the Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration is responsible for monitoring employee safety. A state panel investigating the fire stated that the regulatory system had failed at every level and that the haunted castle had been in violation of over a dozen state fire codes. The panel said that the state's Uniform Construction Code required the owners to install smoke detectors and several other common safety devices before the castle opened. A spokesman for the local volunteer fire department said it had not enforced the state requirement for smoke detectors because the township's building inspector said that the code did not apply to the castle since it was classified only as a temporary structure. Six Flags Great Adventure and its parent company, Six Flags, were indicted by a grand jury on September 14, 1984, on a charge of aggravated manslaughter for recklessly causing the deaths under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to human life. The indictment also charged 2 parks executives, the general manager at the time of the fire and his predecessor, with manslaughter for reckless conduct and ignoring repeated warnings of safety violations. The criminal trial began in New Jersey Superior Court on May 29, 1985. The prosecution argued that repeated warnings by safety consultants to install sprinklers for smoke alarms had been ignored. The defendants denied any liability and argued that the fire was arson and that no precautions would have saved the 8 teenagers' lives. The prosecution called on witnesses fire prevention consultants who had inspected the castle and had recommended the installation of sprinklers for smoke alarms. They told the jury after 5 years of semi-annual inspections, the devices were not in place at the time the attraction burned down. Shift managers called to testify stated that, quote, none of the exit lights were working, bulbs were missing from other lights, and there were no fire alarms, despite a history of patrons using matches and cigarette lighters in the dark corridors, unquote. They further testified that their pleas for safety precautions had been rejected by management for being too expensive. The defense denied any liability, stating that the company executives had carefully considered all safety recommendations, acting on some while rejecting others. They also contended that the fire was arson and that no precautions would have saved lives in a fire where an accelerant was used. However, another defense witness said there were no burn patterns or any evidence of an accelerant being used for the fire. Park officials testified that smoke alarms had been installed, but the park was unable to control vandalism to them and decided not to reinstall them after 1979. A park official testified that having an employee assigned to walk continually through the attraction was a good alternative to the smoke alarms. A top fire safety official testifying for the defense said that sprinklers and smoke detectors might have saved part of the structure, but would not have saved lives because by then, quote, you would have had lethal combustion products throughout the facility, unquote, suffocating the victims. His testimony was later criticized by other fire safety experts as undermining efforts to advance sprinkler legislation. After an 8-week trial and 13 hours of deliberation, the jury found the 2 companies not guilty of the charges. Interviewed after the trial, the jury foreman blamed Jackson Township officials for repeatedly allowing the castle to slip through cracks in the fire code. The jurors held both companies blameless because they had been told by township officials that they needed no permit or sprinklers for the attraction. The 2 park executives, charged separately with manslaughter, avoided trial and possible imprisonment by entering a pretrial intervention program that allowed them to perform community service. The families of 4 of the victims filed civil suits against Six Flags and Six Flags Great Adventure and the castle's builder George Mahana, the owner of Tom's River's Haunted House Company, charging manslaughter and aggravated manslaughter. The New York City Board of Education, the state of New Jersey, Ocean County, and Jackson Township were also included in various suits. 7 of the 8 families later settled out of court for $2.5 million each, while the 8th family chose to go to trial and was awarded $750,000. Immediately after the fire, several other New Jersey haunted house attractions were closed pending fire inspections, including the multi-trailer Doorway to Hell, built by the same company that built the haunted castle. New Jersey and other states passed new safety fire laws for dark rides, making it mandatory for them to have fire exits and fire sprinklers so they could prevent another disaster like the one that took place at the haunted castle. Castle. Park attendance at Six Flags Great Adventure fell sharply for the rest of the year, finishing 15% below the year preceding. Park officials said that pre-fire attendance levels were restored the next year after they reassured the public that the park was made safer by the addition of $5.2 million worth of sprinklers and computerized smoke and heat detectors. However, industry sources reported that ensuing poor attendance almost caused the park to close in 1987. For more than 4 decades, guests have gone to Great Adventure for a day of fun, riding roller coasters, playing boardwalk-style games, and taking part in other amusements. Many guests make lasting memories with their families, unknowing of the tragedy that took place on the very same ground they walked. To this day, Great Adventure does not acknowledge the loss of lives within their park. There is no plaque or memorial for the 8 teenagers who on May 11, 1984 began as a day of fun and games, but ended in an unfortunate tragedy. In today's day and age, theme parks guests often take their safety for granted, but it is due to the misfortunes such as these that safety regulations have developed and expanded to what cultivate the feeling of safety we all know and appreciate today. So that is the history of the Haunted Castle. If you're interested in more information about the tragedy that took place within the attraction, I suggest you check out Doorway to Hell, the mysteries and controversies surrounding the deadly Haunted Castle fire at Six Flags Great Adventure by Peter James Smith. He goes into great detail about the events leading up to and after the fire with over a decade of research. Really good stuff. It's what we used for this video. I'm going to leave a link for the book down in the description below. I think it's like $2.99 or something on Amazon. As always, thank you for watching. We appreciate your support here on the channel. If there's any attractions you would like us to cover, leave a comment down below and we'll look into it for future videos. Until next time, once again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you then.